Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Dan Freed, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together, and I'm excited to have your life story as part of our podcast. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today, and then we can talk about anything that you're working on for today and or tomorrow. Will that work?
Sure. Looking forward to it.
Excited to have you here, bud. So tell us where you were born.
I was born in Los Angeles.
Okay. Did you grow up in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles. I stayed there until my early 20s, for the most part.
What was your favorite thing about growing up in Los Angeles?
So it's hard because at the time I didn't really have anything to compare it to, but I think the weather, I think is pretty incredible, and just the fact that there's so many different things to do. You know, you have the beach not too far away, you can go to the mountains. And yeah, overall, I thought it was a really interesting place to grow up. And now that I've seen what else is out there, I think I was really lucky.
Yeah, I agree. I live in San Diego, so I'm actually talking to you from just north of San Diego. So I totally agree. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
I think it would really depend on the time period. And one of the things about me, I have very few childhood memories.
Okay.
I kind of do have a story about my childhood, but compared to most people my age, the amount of actual concrete memories that I have of childhood are significantly smaller.
Okay. And that's a health thing, right?
No, I mean, I tried to figure this out one day. I think it was just I had a lot of kind of volatility and ups and downs in my childhood that a lot of it just didn't stick.
Oh, I got you.
But I mean, one of my earliest memories was probably from preschool, and then I have bits and pieces throughout, but then I have a storyline just from hearing from family, friends, and kind of putting everything together.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So where'd you go to high school?
So I went to several high schools. I went to Taft High School in the San Fernando Valley, and then I left going to school full time, and I went to a continuation school, and then I went to night school, and then I eventually just I never graduated high school. I took a GED and got basically the equivalent of a high school diploma.
Gotcha. Did you have a favorite subject in high school?
In high school, no. Again, high school was kind of like a blur. I did not do well. So one of the things about me, I have ADHD. I was diagnosed when I was 6. There were some subjects in school that were really interesting to me and that I did well. It was also really dependent on the teacher and the way that they structured the class. But generally speaking, in school, more often than not, I would do pretty bad. And then by the time I was 16, I was failing most of my classes and ended up dropping out.
Wow. Did you have a favorite teacher by chance in high school?
In high school, I can't even remember any of my teachers off the top of my head. I remember I had a 5th grade teacher that did make an impact. I don't remember very much about it. I just remember that was a good year.
Yeah.
And for me, a lot of it is it's very difficult for me to conform to the structured environment of the American educational system.
Right.
And, like my mind would wander, it'd be hard to focus. I was constantly like acting out and talking in class. And there were some teachers that were much better equipped to handle that.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I wasn't intelligent, it was just that I struggled with some of the structure. And so when I would get a teacher like that, I would excel.
Gotcha. So you get your GED, and then where do you go?
So I bounced around like my teenage years from 16 to 19. I traveled throughout California. I was really having a difficult time kind of like finding my place. And then when I lived in New York for a bit when I was 18. When I was 19 was when things started to kind of like clarify and get a little bit better. That was when I was starting to work. So at 16, when I was, going through night school, I was working in fast food. I worked
Right.
at Subway sandwiches. I was working in call centers for like radio stations. Back then, they used to call you and play you music to figure out what their playlist should be.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I bounced around throughout my teenage years. And then at 19, things started to like solidify, and I got a break somewhere around that time as
Mhm.
a chef. And that
Okay.
was the start of my first career as a chef.
So where were you a chef? Was it in New York or in LA?
So both.
Okay.
Uh, I was working in very low level. So when I was in New York at 18, I had moved here. I didn't know anyone.
Mhm.
And I was working back of the house in restaurants.
Gotcha.
So this was before there was Seamless. I was a bike delivery uh, worker for
Right.
restaurants. I used to
Right.
wash dishes and then deliver food as the food orders would come in. And then I started working like prep cook, chopping vegetables, doing things like that, making sandwiches. Um, then when I was in LA, I was working as a waiter in a restaurant.
Okay.
And I had always been interested in cooking,
Mhm.
but I had this regular customer who would come in a couple times a week in the afternoon, and he would eat with his wife. And one day he came in with a chef's coat. And so I told him, I said, worked back of the house prepping vegetables. One day my dream is to become a chef. And
Mhm.
he said, well, why not now? Why don't you come into the hotel across the street and apply to be a cook? So I went in. It was a big hotel. It was the Westin Century Plaza.
Yeah, I've been
Uh,
there.
yeah,
Beautiful.
beautiful. And so I go into the human resources department. I fill out an application. You have to remember, I had no high school diploma, never went to culinary school. My resume read like dishwasher, food runner, waiter, things like that.
Yeah.
And I applied to be a chef. They very politely said, I'm sorry, you're not qualified.
Mhm.
And so I told them, you know, this guy, Andreas, told me to come in and fill out an application. The woman picks up the phone, and next thing I know, the chef's in there. He hires me on the spot.
That from the restaurant.
Yep, he was the executive chef of it was two hotels, but he was the executive chef of the hotel and hired me on the spot.
Wow. How cool is that? It's who you know, right?
It is, but when I quit that role, I sat down with him and I asked him,
Mhm.
why did you take a chance on me? Like, you have tons of people graduating culinary school who would kill for a position like this. Why would you hire somebody with basically no experience? And he told me that when he was coming into the restaurant, he would watch me and he's like, I know that you knew how to work. Like, I was always efficient. I was on top of my stuff. I was moving around a lot and getting things done.
Yeah.
And he said, I knew I could teach you how to cook. And there's a lot of people that come out of culinary school and they know how to cook, but they don't know how to work.
Yeah. Wow. How cool. So
Yeah, I mean,
your work ethic got you that job.
yeah, I think I always worked hard, but it's what's interesting is now I actually, for the most part, I love what I do. And so I work a lot. I work really hard. But when I was a waiter, I still had that, like, I wanted to stay on top of what I was doing. I wanted to perform well. I wanted to work and he noticed it.
Yeah.
You never know who's watching you.
It's true. It's absolutely true. That's a big life lesson, man. You never know who's watching, and people are watching us, right? So after working at Weston, where do you go from there?
So I always wanted to travel, and I was living in LA, early 20s, and I would just apply for jobs all over the world.
Okay.
And one of them called me back. It was Club Med.
Oh, there you go.
And so I went in, they have these kind of like mass hiring events. I went in and they offered me a job. And so I, sold everything I owned. I had no intention of coming back. Sold my car, sold my furniture, everything. And I just took off and went to work for Club Med. And one of the unique things about Club Med at the time was God, this is like 20 years ago now. They had a culture that was very international,
Yeah.
and they would send people to other countries and, do all the paperwork for visas. And even if you didn't speak the language, they would be willing to send you to a different country,
Wow.
which was really, really unique. So
Yeah.
I worked for Club Med for 3 years. I worked in Florida. I worked in Turks and Caicos. I worked in France, and I worked in Cancun.
As a chef?
Yeah, all as a
Okay.
chef. And, I got promoted. I still never went to culinary school, but I learned on the job.
Yeah.
One of the other really unique things about Club Med. So working at the Westin Century Plaza, I did mostly banquets, and I would do kind of like fill-in shifts when people were sick.
Right.
But I never really learned how to cook. I learned how to cook 1,000 steaks where you're just like you're doing the same thing
Right.
over and over again, and you have to do it quickly.
Yeah.
But I was still very low level. When I went to Club Med, I had to learn how to cook. And so there were several things that I did. One, I went and I bought cookbooks, and I would just read cookbooks nonstop and really tried to teach myself a lot of like the more complex things in the hot kitchen.
All right.
And then I recognized that was when I kind of like knew that I really wanted to be a great chef.
Yeah.
And so I needed to learn, if I wanted to be an executive chef, I would have to know how to bake.
Mhm.
And nobody's going to teach me how to bake outside of a culinary school if you're not a baker. So I
Right.
went to the baker, this French guy, and I said, "Hey, will you teach me how to bake?"
Mhm.
And he basically said, "Fuck off. Like, no, like, what do you think this is? I'm not going to teach you." And so I told him, I said, "Listen, I will come in every day, 5 in the morning or whatever time, and I'll roll croissants,
Mhm.
which is the most boring thing that you have to do.
Yeah.
And I'll let you can do whatever you want. You can go outside. He was a chain smoker. Go outside,
Mhm.
smoke. I'll take care of it for you. The only thing that I'm asking is every week, teach me something. Teach me how to
Right.
make brioche. Teach me how to make baguettes, all of this stuff." And so he did. And he ran me through everything. And I would go and I would work my full shift. And I wasn't getting paid for any of this.
Right.
And I would come in the next morning and I would work rolling croissants and helping him do all the prep work. And I learned how to bake. And then I went to the butcher. Again, if I wanted to be an executive chef, I had to know how to butcher.
Mhm.
For him, the thing he hated doing was cleaning the freezer.
Mhm.
You're talking about tons, literally tons of meat that are stacked and they have to be
Yeah.
rotated in an inventory. I said, "Listen, I'll take care of it. I got this for you, but you need to teach me how to take apart a cow, a pig, like really how to do everything."
Yeah.
Also a French guy, and reluctantly he said yes, and I learned how to butcher. And by
Right.
doing that, I basically put myself through culinary school.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. And that's a real important lesson for people that are listening, right? If you really want something that bad, you'll work for free, right? You'll figure out a way to help the person you need to learn from, to help them with what it is that they do. And what you did was figure out what they like to do least, and then went in and did it for free so that they would teach you in turn. And those were skills that you'll never forget, right? You'll have those the rest of your life.
Yes, I don't know how valuable my butchering skills are now,
Yeah.
but I never would have had the career trajectory I had if I didn't do that. There's no
You're a
way.
little bit different business now, and we'll get to
Yeah,
that part, right?
yeah,
But it's cool. I mean, the lessons are still the same, right? Find something that if you're trying to learn from somebody, find something that they don't like doing, do it for them for free, and let them teach you. That knowledge is invaluable, absolutely invaluable. So that's really cool. That's I love that you did that. So you learn butchering, you learn how to bake, you learn how to cook, basically from all these different places and cookbooks and all that. You're with Club Med for 3 years. What was your favorite thing working for Club Med?
I mean, the travel was incredible. I was somebody, it's hard for me to think now because I've traveled so much, but I didn't understand how giant and diverse and fun the world was. And
Yeah.
one of the things about Club Med, I would do usually about a 6-month contract,
Mhm.
and then they give you a break. And sometimes it's a couple of weeks, sometimes depending on if there's seasonality, it can be a couple months.
Right.
And I didn't want to go home because,
Mhm.
I wanted to see the world.
Right.
So that's when I started backpacking.
Wow.
And, my first trip was to Cuba. I just kind of like fell in love with travel. And again, this was 20 years ago. So um, very few people were traveling like this, or very few Americans. And getting that's kind of like when I look back at because I never went to undergrad. I was
Right.
working through it.
Right.
Like, travel experiences taught me a lot of the same skills. It kind of, like, matured me into who I am today.
Yeah. That's cool. So you work for Club Med for 3 years. Then where do you go?
So, my last contract with Club Med was in France, and since in those early days where I picked up a cookbook and was teaching myself, there was a chef that I really admired, Thomas Keller. He was a Michelin 3-star chef, and I started reading these books about fine dining. My last role at Club Med was I was a sous chef. So I was like second in charge of a hotel, and I was going to be promoted to an executive chef.
Mhm.
I knew that if I took that promotion, I would never be a fine dining chef. And I really wanted to work in a Michelin 3-star. I didn't know if I wanted to do it forever, but I was like, I, the most skilled position in a 3-star kitchen is the saucier. So it's like technically skilled.
Okay.
Um, And for some reason, I had it in my head that I just wanted to do that. I wanted to see what it was like and to challenge myself. So when I was working at Club Med, every single day off, I used to go and I would apply to a different Michelin 3-star restaurant in France.
Wow.
There were 26 of them at the time, if I remember correctly. And I would take the train on my day off. I would walk into kitchens. I would walk up to chefs. I would say, "Hey, I want to work here. What can I do?" And just tried anything to get my foot in the door. And I got laughed out of kitchens. People wouldn't talk to me. I was an American, which is like these are some of the best restaurants in the world.
Right.
Um, and it was really tough, but I got one Michelin 3-star that agreed to let me in if I took a massive demotion, which I knew that I would have to do. But I went from a sous chef, about to have my own hotel, to the lowest position, basically peeling potatoes. And so
Wow.
I took it. I left Club Med and I went to peel potatoes at a Michelin 3-star.
Wow. So you peel potatoes at a Michelin 3-star for how long?
So that transition was brutal. I remember hating life and, you know, the environment of a Michelin 3-star there at the time, it was like people yelling, screaming, much worse than what you saw on TV.
High
A lot of
intense.
high
High
pressure.
intensity. Yeah.
Yeah, and once I kind of I just stuck to it. I'm like, no matter what, I want this. And I wanted to be saucier. I knew what I wanted to do. I didn't know how long it would take, but I just doubled down and I worked harder. I was first one in the kitchen, last one to leave. Um, and then I got promoted, and then I got promoted again. And like the way that the French brigade system works in the kitchen, they have different departments. So there's like garde manger, poisson, viande, legume, and each one of these departments, like, you know, you're making the vegetables that go on the plate, or you're butchering the meat and cooking the meat, or things like that. And you're supposed to go into one of these stations, learn everything and master it, and then train other people and kind of like move up. And if you're really a quick learner, you can do that faster than most people. So
Right.
some people will do one station for a year. If you're really, really good, sometimes it can take you a couple of months.
Wow.
And each time you switch stations, depending on the needs of the kitchen and staffing, there's the potential that you could also get promoted.
Yeah.
So I was there for 1 year, and when I left, I was saucier. I
And
had
just
done
just for people that don't know, that are listening, what is saucier? What is that? What's the definition of that?
the guy that makes the sauces.
Okay. Okay. So that's the big thing in French restaurants is the guy that makes the sauces.
For me, it was. Saucier is a prestigious position. And I worked in garde manger, which is like the cold food prep, and I worked, you know, gutting fish and doing vegetables. Saucier is like making, there's so many different types of sauces. They're so complex. Some of them take a week to make, and so many
Wow.
different ingredients. And that's what I wanted to do. That's usually the last kind of like chef de partie position, or at least where I was,
Yeah.
before you move up into kind of a sous chef or more of a leadership position.
Gotcha. So you do that for a year, and then where do you go?
Then I was completely miserable. So I had gotten what I wanted,
Yeah.
but once I had it, I was working myself to death. I mean,
Yeah.
I was burning out. Working nonstop. I was living off of I was a chain smoker at that point. I was drinking nonstop coffee, not eating well, my physical health, like, and I was 25, 20,
Wow.
I think I was 24 when I got it, so around 24, 25, and I was just
Wow.
burnt out on life.
Yeah.
Um, the good thing about being burnt out is I never had time to do anything. So I had saved money for a year of just working my ass off.
Yeah.
And so I bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. Um, and I didn't know if I would ever cook again. It was actually like a really difficult experience to break from my dream. And I went to Thailand and got a hotel room and stayed in bed for about a month.
Wow. Why did you pick Thailand?
More kind of like random.
Okay.
I used to, so back to those days of Club Med, I
Yeah.
would never plan vacations. I would just sit down at a computer and I would say, okay, this is how much money I have. Where can I buy a ticket? And some of them were a little bit thought out. Like I had an idea, somebody told me, hey, this is good, but it wasn't
Yeah.
like well researched. It was just like, I don't know what's there, but I don't know what's in Singapore or Cambodia. Who knows? Like, let's find out.
That's cool. So you go to Thailand, you're in bed for a month. Then what do you do?
I mean, and I actually went through a significant depression. So it took me a while to kind of like get my health back, to get out of bed, to get into healthy routines. And then I tried a couple of different businesses and nonprofits mostly. So like once I was feeling better physically and mentally, which was not an easy journey. One of the things that I tried to do, and this was my first time, I think this was the first time I tried to raise money. I tried to raise money for several businesses back when I was a chef. Um, but it was I had the idea of doing a nonprofit
Mhm.
where we would basically train people, because at this point I could teach culinary school. I was saucier of a Michelin
Sure.
3-star cook. We could train people to be low-level cooks, like entry level, and
Yeah.
then place them in cruise ships and international hotels. And I had a network at that point and a little bit of a reputation. So my thought was, you know, buy kind of like a restaurant, turn that restaurant into a culinary school where we
Yeah.
could have this rotating thing of people and I could train them and I could help place them. And so I did a business plan. I volunteered there. this wasn't really my idea. There were things at the time that were very similar to this business model. So one of them, I went in Cambodia and I trained with them and I saw how they were training people. And then I tried to raise money and get everything together and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't get it off the ground.
So you're not able to get it off the ground. Then what do you do?
Then I ran out of money and I had to borrow money from a friend, go stay on a friend's couch back in LA and go back to waiting tables.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
What was that like?
That was horrible. But I mean, that's the thing. I've gone back to zero a lot.
Yeah.
And after I know what it's like to be there, when I say horrible, it's not as bad as what most people think.
Yeah.
It didn't last very long. I was there a couple of months.
Yeah.
I decided I wanted to work in the kitchen again. I also still wanted to travel. So I ended up getting a job on a cruise ship.
Oh, there you go. Which cruise company?
Norwegian Cruise Lines.
Oh, I've been on that. I've been on one. That's cool. They do really well in the culinary department.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. It was again, that was my last role in the culinary industry. It was a very interesting experience. I was there probably about 2 years.
Yeah.
And at the end, I was an executive sous chef overseeing multiple restaurants, multiple kitchens, large staffs of people. And it was, there were some things that I really, really enjoyed about it. There were some things that just were grindy and started to burn me out. But one of the really significant things that happened, this was my first time learning business. When you're in a large organization like that, I'd managed restaurants before and had some ownership of P&L, but I didn't know how to do like scheduling programs for 50 people, how to manage food budgets that went into 7 figures at times, and like all this complexity. And I was good at it and I kind of liked it. And I had a boss who had a very interesting career trajectory where he was a banker and then had burnt out in banking. And
we hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.